With the release of all of the broken vehicles in World of Tanks, some rebalance needs to happen. This rebalance is what I like to call the double pump experience. This is going to be just a tad broken. Of course, today we are looking at these bad boys, the double barrel Soviet vehicles, and the first one that we have is the premium version, which is of course going to be the most balanced one, which is the Object 703-2, and this one is a replay that is outstanding. Now let's boost up that minimap size before I get called out in the comment section, as pretty much all of the videos do when I start off and I always forget. But either way, what we have is a replay that is a stellar one because of the fact that the double pumps get this huge alpha damage, and unfortunately for the M6A2E1 he takes one of the first rounds in the game, and he will take plenty more as the game goes on. But the key thing about the Object 703-2 is that you don't ideally want to fire both shells, because as soon as you do that you're going to end up with this horrible situation where essentially you're going to be stuck in a position where you are not going to be able to reload, you're going to get DPM down, you're going to end up in a very bad spot. Now luckily, in this game, this position is very well guarded, and for the opponents to actually push out, they're going to have to do some very silly things in terms of YOLOing round to actually get damage, at which point they expose themselves to what is usually a ton of tank destroyers behind, but unfortunately in this game, no real support other than the Scorpion G and the EOC even 90. But remember, if they really YOLO around, there is also people on the opposite side, which you can see, who are going to punish these people as well. Now luckily, in this game, you don't really see that much of the enemy team doing a whole lot, which is nice. And of course, coming up against the tech tree equivalent of this vehicle in the IS-2-2. And that vehicle is probably not as good as this one. Now, I wonder why that is. It's not like you can buy this one, is it? Oh yes you can. But either way, the IS-2 has that horrible weak point on the cupola and gets penned pretty much every time. Now the Object 703 does have a few weak points, like in the cupola, but it's nowhere near as prominent. And unfortunately, the IS-2-2 decides he's going to come around and do exactly what you should never really do on this corner, which is expose yourself out, because you do get punished pretty badly. Now the roof of the IS-2-2, like we've been saying, is not very good, and you can actually overmatch it with certain vehicles, I believe. So yeah, it's not particularly great, but a lovely little shot there. This is a sneaky spot that you can use in your own game if you want to, which is through this building. A lot of people hide behind this because they think it's going to provide cover, but as you saw there, not the best cover overall. But a nice little shot into the side of the 50 TP's prototype. Of course, this is a predominantly good spot for you to actually use, especially when they are trying to get shots across over here, since you can hit them, and of course when they are exposed, given in a giant opening, which is saying shoot me here. Either way, 4,000 damage done in this replay, really good one so far, and hopefully we'll be able to see what else is going to be up for grabs within this one. You can see the 50 TP PR there is of course feeling a little bit hurt that he's taken a few rounds from the 703, so decides he's going to feed this 703 even more. Now, so far, done really well with the brawling scenario. Game's looking pretty nice. You're seeing an AMBT and an IS-3 over this side. There's a Lorraine 40T in the centre who's subsequently been taken out, but there's still a lot of damage left in the game. The team are down by 4,000 hit points, and it's looking like, oh shit, we're going to be in a bit of a ruffle stomp. So not particularly the greatest, but the IS-3, for some unbeknownst reason, not known by any man, decides he's going to fire HE. I have no idea either, but he decides to fire the HE rounds. Luckily, the 703 is going to take his full reload to actually reload both shells, since you never know when fighting against these types of tanks whether or not you're going to have to put out a round. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't actually take that full reload and subsequently bounces. Ideally, if you were going to take it from a perspective of like the peak gameplay, then you would have reloaded for that extra 3 seconds and then gone round. Which wasn't the case, but it doesn't matter too much. The heat round penetration of this, 270, so pretty decent. You're not really going to have too much troubles, but once again, feeling the pressure, I believe, at this point in the game against this IS-3, who is still firing HE. I probably would at this point have maybe gone around and just tried to pump him, but you know, kind of mindful that as you push around this hill, you can be exposed to people on the hill, especially as you get further into this area. They can line up a shot as you go around, so there is always people up there, and you can take a shell sometimes if they're waiting there ready for you to push. Now, you're seeing the full reload being taken here, loads of these standard rounds, which is nice to see. APCR is standard, the premium pen obviously having 270, and the standard pen having what, like subsequently less. I mean, 221, not particularly the greatest, and can be a bit of a pain when you're coming up against tier 10s. It's not preferential, obviously. I think they did away with preferentials a long time ago, but yeah, the 703 not particularly the greatest when it does get bottom tier, and it's a bit of bottom tier fever. Now, the AMBT on the enemy team, don't know why he's reversing with his ass out to the people that are literally spotted right in front of him, but he does so, and of course pays the price with sending back to the garage, which we've got no complaints about, and the double pump mechanics really doing him dirty there. But the problem with these vehicles is that the double pump mechanic, obviously, you know, you have to charge it up and then you fire both shells all at once for increased damage if you can pen both shells. Of course, 390 alpha each shell, you then have 780 total, which means against most of the heavy tanks that you'll come up against, if you can double pump and then not take a subsequent shell from people realizing that you've now got a like 30-second reload because of the fact that you fired both at once, and it has the typical kind of auto reloading mechanic where if you've got one in the chamber already and you reload in the second one, it's faster than if you had none in the chamber and you were reloading your first one. So of course, as soon as you fire both in that kind of big barrage shot, you're going to end up in a bit of a sticky situation where people realize that, and then they're going to pump you because their DPM is usually going to be way better than what you'll find on these double barrel ones. But they also don't get the fact that they can double pump and of course ammo rack people, which is always a highlight of what you see with the double pumpers. But you know, this gameplay been played very, very well so far. 6,000 damage. Bit unfortunate against that IS-3, probably didn't need to bounce as many as he did, maybe could have gone round anyway and just taken him out since he was only firing HE, but we won't complain too much about that in this game, since very good one, and there's still plenty of carrying left to do. There is 8,000 hit points on the enemy team, only 4,300 on the friendly team, so a lot of low health tanks. Scores still even, but yeah, lots of lower health tanks, and of course a lot more damage been taken. There's a lot of tank destroyers on the enemy team, and we all know about Erlenberg and tank destroyers literally camping in the back and beyonds over in the wooded area over here, as well as the little magical forest of doom that is literally, you have to YOLO in to spot anyone, and of course the first person to YOLO in gets taken out pretty quickly, and then everyone in the forest dies because they're literally sat out in the open of a forest, and once you're spotted it, it's not good. But either way, this gameplay is not about that. It is about the pumping action. And there you go, the first double pumper for 798 damage. Full penetration on the TVP-VTU. Kind of sucks to be a TVP-VTU, to be honest. And he does pay for it with a chunky amount of hit points gone. Now, the first reload does get done, and he pumps it into the UDES, trying to get that opportunistic shell. At this point, not really too worried about, you know, being able to maximize the damage per minute, because he wants to make sure that the hit points of the opponents are low as possible, because it's going to be like a barrage of opponents if they do start stomping his friendly team, that they're all going to come at once. So it's really about just maximizing how much damage and just taking vehicles out of the game, and if it means that his teammates can then subsequently take that tank out rather than him saving the shell and potentially carrying on later, it's going to yield him more damage in the long run, which is a weird result when you think about it. If you are sacrificing your damage per minute but you end up with more damage, yeah, it's a strange one, but goes for the Scorpion G. Unfortunately, doesn't come away with a win against him, but doesn't matter a whole lot, since now the 122TM is trying to feed him with a lovely shell. He does indeed load the round, and it goes straight through the lower plate of the 122TM. 122TM, of course, having the worst damage per minute pretty much of any heavy tank at this tier, the standard heavy tank anyway. And so, yeah, not too much to worry about, but he does have a chunky, about a bit more hit points of damage that he can deal with every single one of his rounds with the 122 as opposed to the 703. But it's only one, like 10 more damage, so it's not a not at the end of the world if he is having to trade 1-for-1 with him. So, having noticed now that he is on a significant amount of damage, 7,900 to be precise, and with still 2,400 damage left on the enemy team, there is no way of him really being able to pick up 10k damage within this result, and there is no expectation with a tank that really suffers in terms of damage per minute. And yeah, I think that you guys can understand that sometimes it just isn't the way when you think about vehicles like this, is that you're kind of limited by the vehicle at this top end to be able to come away with results. Obviously, it still can be done, and I'm sure that there are plenty of replays where people have picked up 10k damage in the 703-2, but probably nowhere near the amount that you would see in things maybe like the Scorpion G or the SU-130 PM, or some of the tanks that are far more reliable in the way in which they can be played and the amount of damage that they can deal. So at this point, very bad situation. I'll join you back when the action kind of heats up a little bit more, because you don't want to be sat here watching for 2 or 3 minutes whilst we're waiting. So Scorpion G, we didn't have to wait too long to see what happens, but unfortunately he goes for the shot on the Scorpion G, but his friendly teammate or enemy who had died previously in the BZ had actually got in the way of his gun, which meant that when he tried to fire, obviously the gun was stuck in his gun, and then yeah, you get absolutely cucked by a dead player on the enemy team. So brilliant result there. Now he tries to proxy the Scorpion G from what I can tell, and of course not working too well. Whether Scorpion has scurried off, we don't know, but he does actually pre-aim where the Scorpion's going to be, and he launches one into him, and then obviously Scorpion, thinking that he's going to be able to hit him again, doesn't realise the 703 for some reason has 2 shells. Oh, I wonder why the double-barreled tank has 2 shells that he can fire. I mean, the more realistic when it comes to autoloaders in the game, since you have 2 barrels to fire. But either way, good result against Scorpion. Doesn't actually manage to take a hit. You can't take a hit as well. Really, well, you could, but it would be a 50-50 as to whether you're going to be sent back to the garage with the hit points he has left. But he does manage to bounce the shell off the Scorpion G, and then he finds the Ferdinand in the centre. Now, given the fact that he has a teammate who's going to come up from behind, no point in pushing the Scorpion, and he secures some kind of, I guess, just proxying and keeping that guy lit. Now the Scorpion on the enemy team does indeed get spotted, and he stays out in the open for way too long, and then with the double pump left on the tank, can he secure the victory against the Ferdinand? Of course he can't. The round goes into the building in front. So 9,000 damage done, and I'm sure you guys are enjoying this little experience of the double-barreled pumpers, and of course comes away with the victory, playing pretty much in this spot for the entire game. And you can see how powerful this spot on this map really is when you do get a heavy that is as good as you're seeing here. And yeah, a good player when they jump into it as well. Obviously you can see the 6 marks, not the 3 marks that you can see on the typical tank, so I mean that kind of looks cool in its own right. But yeah, the double barrel pumpers are certainly a force to be reckoned with. Let's jump into the tier 10 version of this vehicle, see whether it carries on throughout the entire tech tree. Now then, of course, we have the top tier daddy of the Soviet double-barreled heavies to actually showcase now in today's replay in the second one. So what do we have with the ST2? Because the ST2 is one that I kind of find very interesting, since it's not typically known for being absolutely unbelievably crazy. I think it's probably lower down on the tier list than you would expect for most heavy tanks at this tier, but at the end of the day it can still do 1,000 damage, and you saw it up against the 705A, which is the alternate tier 10 heavy from the Soviet line. I mean, there's about 1 million of them at this point, but yeah, still really good to see. Now obviously gets spotted by the enemy team. He knows there is only a very minute place where people can actually spot him from, so he goes for the blind fire on the WZ-132A. Obviously didn't hit. You saw the smoke, you saw the explosion. It's not going to have hit. Of course, when you start seeing the round not actually land, or any sparks or anything like that, you know that you've probably hit from that sort of range, unless it's obscured by bushes or something like that. Now the E100 on the friendly team, he's going to be a part of this replay, followed along by the Object 277 as well. So there is 10 midgets, there's a flock of burbs, and Sped AF. We're going to have some brilliant games in this. And of course, the typical meta of the game is where you have the enemy team pushed up quite aggressively into the position where often you saw the Kranvangs during their most overpowered state in World of Tanks, and they would often get on this ridgeline. Now, unfortunately for the VZ, he takes a 800 damage shell, which we love to see, and unfortunately, in return, he does take a shell. But those hit points are going to be needed throughout this entire game, and with the platoon that you're seeing here, they're hopefully going to be able to pull out a win. Now, whether that happens or not is to be said, and hopefully this replay will be exciting for you guys to learn, obviously, about these double-barreled and how you can take them out, and also the power that they have, and how a player that's obviously mastered some degree of it can use them. Now, you can see here that the ST2 has already fired multiple double pumpers, and ideally you want to be using that when you think it's available. And usually when it comes to these double pumpers, the best opportunity to use them is to use them when you are having to poke up against multiple opponents, because you don't want to be poking out as much. So if you can hit people twice in a row against softly armored targets that you can guarantee that they're going to pen, then that is ideally what you want to be doing, because you don't want to poke out as much as you might have to if you're using it as like a single shot with higher DPM, because you're going to take probably more hits. You're opening yourself up to double the opportunity of you being hit in the first place. So that's not what you want to do, and that's really where you're seeing this replay being used quite well. Now, there are some opportunities where maybe actually utilising the single shot is the best idea to do, and that's really down to what you think at the time. Are you going to need the shell for someone who might be coming up from behind you? Do you think that it's no longer really imperative that I need to fire them both, because, you know, the tanks that I'm up against, they're not really that much of a threat, and actually it would be nice to have the extra damage per minute of holding that shell and using it. But remember as well is that if you fire both of the shells, you're going to be reloading for a longer period of time, and when you only fire one of them, if you actually find that you don't have a shot on the next time you reload, then it's not going to be ideal. Now, for some reason, our player here decides to push into the Badger. I'm not entirely sure if he was saying about actually getting up forward and stuff like that and pushing. I don't know. You know, it's World of Tanks. It's just typical World of Tanks meta. Now, the game is going absolutely dreadfully at this point in the game. Enemy team have 7 tanks. There are only 3 kills on the friendly team, so they are up by 4 vehicles, so not particularly great, and it's going to start becoming a rout by the enemy team. The Object 277 that was in the platoon has actually subsequently got taken out by, I believe, the Jaeger and his forces down in the valley, and now pre-knowing that the enemy team are pushing the valley down here, he's got to make his way up to the hill. Now, for those of you that know this map, or at least any of you who have played any amount of games on Mountain Pass where you've ended up losing from this spawn, you know of the power of this hill. And this hill is the winner of games. Like, genuinely one of the biggest winners of games on Mountain Pass, where you genuinely just thought, no, there's no way of winning. And it's because people think that tanks up here, you know, they can just stroll up, they can deal damage to them, and it's going to be easy. But one thing that people always forget about is that often tank destroyers will park themselves up in these bushes and never be able to get spotted, as well as the fact that you can get rounds as people advance towards you. I mean, case in point, the Jaeger sat out in the open against heat rounds from this vehicle. It's not going to go well, is it? Let's be honest. And of course, pumps them for that damage. Now, knowing full well that the tanks are going to be coming from the opposite direction as well, the VZ, the Maus and the TVP T50-51, it's imperative that he really gets rid of the Jaeger and vehicles like this that are coming from this side, and subsequently loads the double pumper to be able to get him out of the game. And you can see the E100 obviously conscious of getting rid of the Jaeger. I'm pretty sure there's some underlying health hazards when it comes to leaving a Jaeger left alive when you're in a E100, so wants to get him out of the game. And of course now he realises that his teammate in the E100 is going to find it very, very much not a ideal scenario because of the fact that, you know, when you have no turret armour, it's going to be painful for the most part. But yeah, hopefully we'll see the Jaeger get taken out. And the ideal thing is to use the turret armour of the ST2 since it's stronger than the E100 to actually come away with a win. Unfortunately, not the case so far, but maybe we'll see it later on. And unfortunately, the E100 comes out and gets taken out. Now, that's probably down to the fact they get pumped by the E100 for nearly 1,000 damage or just over, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. But the VZ55 obviously showcased with the turret armor there, showcasing the turret weak point that is that cupola, which can be penned, but it is minuscule. So if you're in a another heavy tank with maybe worse accuracy, it's probably not going to go very well. But the enemy team, for some reason, unbeknownst to anyone other than them, are deciding that they're all going to advance all at once. Now, not best idea. One by one, you always want to push as a team, especially when you're all low health, because what happens when all of the tanks are low health and they're all pushing at what, like, individually? Well, they all individually get taken out by a tank that they can't pen individually. So far, 7,000 damage has been done, and there's not actually that much hit points left on the enemy team, but they're all doing it in a horrible manner. I mean, the Mao's there just exposing himself, and when you're above a Mao's, the armor becomes just a little bit tedious when you're playing up against heat ammunition because you're aiming down into it, where the armor values just decrease significantly, and you can see he's just penning the upper plate of the Mao's, and I'm sure the Mao's player is probably crying at home still from this round of World of Tanks, where his team are just throwing their hit points away. And instead of actually going for this shell straight away, he waits till the Mao's exposes his turret armor, and he goes into the rounded section of the Mao's. Of course, the rounded section of the Mao's turret becomes a horrible weak point, mainly because of the fact that, as with all of the circles in real life, any point that you look at it from wherever you are, you can find a flat surface, because it's a ball, cylinder, whatever you want to call it. You can essentially hit it at a perpendicular angle, and obviously when you can hit things at flat angles in World of Tanks, you are going to be able to pen more likely. And unfortunately for the enemy team, they are going to struggle now with a tank that has performed very, very well. 8,300 damage. Securing the damage on that hill, it's just a pain when heavy tanks have to trawl up that hill against other vehicles that have good turrets and are very, very good players, obviously having picked up 2 marks on this one and played it very, very well. Now, granted, probably didn't need to take the hit against the TVP since he was going to come up anyway, so maybe he could have held off just a second, but we're not going to take it too much, because at the end of the game, people like this, you know, you've got the health to be able to take a hit, or even 2 hits, or maybe even all of them, because of the fact that you've saved up those hit points for that late game. So it's not a worry. I'm sure that that's probably what he was thinking. I don't really care if I'm going to take 1 hit, because I'm going to take him out either way. Now, the artillery piece on the enemy team, I believe, is, of course, the GRE 100, which could potentially take him out if he catches him off guard and hits the weakest armor of the ST2, but it's probably not too easy. Now, one thing I want to note about the ST2 is that we've talked about a lot about the gun, a lot about the positioning of the map and the gameplay style that our players here has used, but not actually about the tank. So one thing that I want to talk about is obviously this big cupola. Now, with the ST2 or ST1, you guys know about that cupola, which is essentially a big weak point that is on the STI. And then obviously the lower plate, big weak point, and as you angle, you can then expose this plate here, but the ST2 is probably not so bad of a case that you get penned, but yeah, you start angling and this flat plate here is going to be able to be hit and taken out pretty easily. And then the turret armor is kind of sucky when you start looking at it from the side, which is not ideal, but it is kind of what it is at this point. But either way, 8,700 damage done. I think he's actually pinged to his teammate to say, can I actually have the last damaging hits on the GRE 100? Don't know if the E5 is going to abide by it. It looks like he's not going to, but that's not a big worry. Of course, the E5 on plenty of hit points, 800. And he's kind of baiting his way towards the GRE 100. Our player here decides he's actually going to load up the AP round. I don't know if he fired the HE But it looks like the E5 is actually going to grace him with being able to pick up the final hit here on the GUI 100, which is kind of nice. Thank you very much to the GUI 100, the T125 player. Loads up that double pumper, and goodbye. What a brilliant result for, of course, the ST2, and a nice one to actually showcase with these vehicles. And hopefully you guys actually saw that some of the tanks that maybe aren't the pinnacle of broken within World of Tanks can still be played very well. Hopefully you did enjoy. Of course, check out these videos on screen if you want to see some more from the channel, and of course me, and of course subscribe if you aren't already to see more content like this coming out on a fairly daily basis, or every other day at least, on the channel for the next foreseeable future. Thank you and goodbye.